Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie, so that you don't necessarily have to be. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time with me today. Today, I'm talking with Matt Diemer from Daily Crypto News about, you probably guessed it, cryptocurrencies. Two specific things, just talking generally about how they're working currently. Are there any regulations? What's going on with them? How do they work? And then secondly, Trump's 180 on them. He was a skeptic on cryptocurrencies in his first administration and has since completely embraced them, including selling Trump coins and trying to set up a Trump stable coin as well. And that's curious. Is that corruption when Donald Trump is the head of the executive branch that would be regulating these cryptocurrencies? Not to mention there was recently a dinner at Mar-a-Lago held for the highest owners of his Trump coin. And so is that corruption? Is it right there in the open corruption? Is this pay for play? So we get into all that with Matt, and here's that conversation with Matt Diemer, who you can check out at dailycryptonews.net. Matt, thanks for coming on. Good to talk to you again. And I figured if we're going to talk about crypto, I should talk to the guy that has a podcast called Daily Crypto News, right? I mean, that seems to be the right source to go to. So I guess the first thing, the thing I want to talk about on this is what I feel like is this stuff has gone a little bit under the radar, specifically with Trump's whole World Liberty Financial and the Trump coin and the meme coin he released before taking office a couple days before that. And I think most of that's because people, like, crypto's complicated and it's hard to understand sometimes for people. And there's a lot of, it's a new technology. I mean, I say new, I know it's been around for a little while, but for most people, something like, only 7% or only 1% of Americans have ever, bought anything using crypto. And so, it's a pretty niche thing still. And so I feel like people just generally don't understand it. And I feel like it would be worth getting an explainer from you of how this stuff works, and specifically with a view to how the Trump family is using it currently. So Donald Trump was sort of famously skeptical. I feel like the Biden administration and first Trump administration were both pretty skeptical about crypto. So I guess the first question is, what do you think changed, if anything, to make him fully embrace it?
Okay, so first, Blake, thank you for having me. It's good to see you. It's been a minute. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to be on the Homeless Conservative channel, sir. Um, so there's a couple things that changed, and a lot of things that were probably realized by the Trump administration. The first one thing that changed was a lot of campaign and lobby money coming in. So when you have a industry that is $2 trillion, right? I'm sorry, it's $3.3 trillion right now of the crypto market. 2 trillion in Bitcoin. You have a lot of Bitcoiners with a lot of capital that is just bouncing around. You have companies that are created, for example, the Winklevoss twins, the Coinbase with Brian Armstrong, Ripple's CEO Brad Garlinghouse. The Ripple commands $100 billion right now. You have a lot of money that's coming in to get this guy elected, and they were forces in getting him elected. Let's not hide that.
Yeah.
So we have that plus lobbying and different people in Congress that is just a force. So the money is there. It's now a political force, and they decided to implement and execute on of that capital. They just said, hey, you know what? We are holding this capital, but we're not going to get people to do it altruistically and say, hey, let's try to support this industry. So now we got to put our money where our mouth is and start influencing. So that's number one. Number two is that they found out how much money is to be made here. This is a new and nascent industry. This in AI and other industries are coming. For example, autonomous vehicles, whatever. When you are making the laws about how this is going to and what regulations are going to be implemented and take effect to these new industries, you get to stack the deck in whatever favor you want. And so the money that is coming into the space right now, or the opportunity for people who understand and are making the laws, is infinite. With that said, the stablecoin bill that passed yesterday, I'm sorry, went out of committee yesterday in the Senate, now it's down to the floor for debate. Uh, we're talking about, having regulated stablecoins. And now, what does that mean? One thing that people
tell us the difference between like stable coins, meme coins, and what we traditionally call cryptocurrencies, because I think that's also probably a a misconception right there on those three things, like or any other things I need to know about. But I mean, those are the three I know about.
Right. So let's just say everything that uses cryptography is a cryptocurrency. So it's not like this, magical thing that this is a crypto, that's not a crypto. If it uses some kind of cryptography, it's a cryptocurrency. If it's decentralized or centralized, that's a whole different story. How is the consensus mechanism that's used as the proof of work, proof of stake, proof of whatever that somebody made up as a consensus mechanism? That is, another topic. But if it uses cryptography to secure the transaction and puts it on a block in a blockchain, it's a cryptocurrency. Now, there's different kind of cryptocurrencies out there. There are meme coins, which is basically you're using a platform, probably something like Solana or Ethereum, to make a coin that is more so just a meme, a kind of like marketing exploit that trades off hype and ideas or reputation to attract money into it, and then it's a kind of a gambling house. Will number go up? Can we retract the money and put the money in? And who gets out first? Then there's things like Bitcoin, which is a autonomous, decentralized system that is just kind of like code that's ran out there and that's operating without much control, but there is ways to edit the network and make changes to it through heavy lifting of consensus.
And Bitcoin's like 2/3 of the market right now, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then you have some like stablecoins, and stablecoins is just a cryptocurrency using cryptography that is basically making a digital representation of a dollar. So if I give you a dollar, you give me a digital token that says, "Hey, you have a dollar to spend." Now, let me go back to why this is so important. Is that there's two things that we have to. There's one thing we have to frame first. One is this was a once we had cryptography, a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, has been in discussion for many years. That means the Fed would make their own digital representation of the dollar, right? And so they'll just print dollars out of thin air, like they usually do anyway, but this
Right.
time digitally, right?
Yeah.
Because it's digital, and something that Ethereum has pioneered is that digital dollars now are programmable, meaning that you can use smart contracts and they can execute on different parameters. Do they execute when as a certain date and unlock? Are they able to be spent on certain ways? Can you track them? The sky's the limit of what you can program it to do. People were very scared of the government being in control or the Fed being in control of your digital dollars.
Right.
Me, me,
Understandable.
per,
To
me
some degree,
personally,
right?
me personally, I think that the stable coin is the slipperier slope than the CBDC, and we can get into that in a little bit. A stablecoin again is a private company that made and registered. Now it's looking at registering is I'm giving them a dollar and they're giving me a digital representation of it. Now, why is the whole game changing about like, hey, this is a great idea? Because Blake, let's just frame this for you in for everybody
Yeah.
in a very simple way. I'm giving you real money. You put this into some kind of whatever bonds, some kind of treasuries, some kind of yield bearing financial asset or product. And for example, Tether in USDT right now, let's just call it $100 billion. Now, even if you buy US treasuries at 4.5%, what are you making?
Well, yeah, you're making a bunch of money, and it's like a bank essentially, right? It's no different than what a bank does in the broad strokes, right? It's like I'm giving the bank a dollar, they're holding that dollar from me, but really what they're doing is investing that dollar and making more money on it than they're giving me an interest. But these
Yes,
stable coins they're not giving any interest, right?
yes, but yeah, they can, depending on
Okay,
whose product. These are different products.
so
So
they can't. So someone could choose to. Yeah.
that's a different company. I'm just talking about the stablecoin company. They
Okay.
take a dollar and give you a digital representation. Now, if I created a yield company that says, hey, if you give me your stablecoins, I'll pay a yield on it, that's a different product. But what is happening now is it's like a bank, but there's a difference. Is you get all your money in digital forms, and I keep all your money and I can invest it, right? Into a stable or asset that is approved as a backing for the stable dollar, right? So now I get to use all of that money as yield. Number one. Number two is that you have a way of I just lost my train of thought. You have all that money. Number two is it's not a bank because you don't have any overhead. This is just using AWS servers. You pay for the servers to stay online, or if it's a decentralized system, which it isn't, is a centralized system. You basically just pay your compute, and it's all profit right there from there. And number three is where the gold is nobody's talking about the velocity of money. So it's not that you get $100 billion in the bank, and if the stablecoin bill is passed, these companies are going to be trillions of dollars of cash on hand. We're talking about the velocity of money, where if everybody knows how GDP is calculated, dollars are traded multiple times. So imagine something like Circle or Tether or Trump's first whatever it's called.
USD1, I think, is what they're wanting
Yeah,
to
yeah,
call
you're right.
this thing. Yeah.
USD1 is trading hands 5-6 times per digital dollar. So your $1 trillion invested could be a $7 trillion GDP, which is a massive power flex, right? Of
Yeah.
not only capital, of national security, of just strength, global economic strength. And so these companies are in a position to be the new, not banks, but the new capital allocators of the 21st century.
There's usually a combination of the Fed and a bank, right? Because they're basically creating the currency, sort of, and they're the ones monetizing off of it by taking your dollars and investing them otherwise, and you get a digital coin that's worth $1. And I assume that goes up and down with inflation, obviously, but
As of
it's a
right now,
dumb
we'd
question.
actually don't. As of right now, I would very much be hesitant of putting any kind of label of what they're like, because that
Yeah,
implies regulation and law and certain standards of practice. Right now, there aren't any, and the reason why this is important to me is because we've already seen that private companies, and especially when working with Congress or the executive branch and just the people in general, they are able to skirt our constitutional rights and freedoms because they are private companies. We have already had a whole discussion about First Amendments on Twitter, on Facebook, on whatever that says, "Hey, do I have the constitutional First Amendment right to voice my speech?" And the answer is no, because they're a private company. And so, what does a private company that now holds my dollars now gives you a product that is held by such company? How does that operate in the world of the Constitution of the United States of America or any other kind of law that is now maybe subject to only their terms and services? So, I would say I would be very hesitant of putting any label on that until we actually understand what we're dealing with. And now we're talking about programmable money instead of a bank regulation that actually has evolved over hundreds of years.
and I would assume governments are. I mean, most governments are pretty skeptical of new technologies anyway. But in this situation, I would assume it's especially there's some skepticism just because it can kind of force them out of a part of the thing that they do. I mean, the Fed has the like monetary policy of trying to keep inflation low and unemployment low, and they have this dual mandate. But like that can kind of get shoved aside if, for example, someone came up with one of these things that got mass adoption throughout the United States, for example, and it kind of puts the government on the sideline, especially if they're in a situation where they can't track this stuff and they can't use it for, like right now, we use banks a lot of times for example, criminal prosecutions of after 9/11. We have what $10,000 limits on what you can deposit a day without the bank having to notify the federal government of those deposits. And almost every time we see one of these bribery schemes come up with like Bob Menendez, the senator that got nailed for this, or what was the other one? There was another senator like a decade ago or so that similar situation, but they were doing 9,000 at a time so that it didn't have to flag it at. And so I just assume some of this stuff kind of goes away because the government can't track that kind of thing. And that's where we get into this privacy versus that's the upside for a lot of these cryptocurrencies, right? Is that even though Bitcoin has a trackable Bitcoin is trackable to a wallet, but not to a human being. Like you can't necessarily know who that person is, right?
Well, in your just statement there, you conflated a lot of different things into one thing, and now we're talking about Bitcoin and stablecoins as they're the same thing, but they're not.
Right, right, yeah. Sorry, and you're
So
right. They're not.
and and,
Yeah,
and and again, this is part of why we're having this discussion because these generalized terms of hey, cryptocurrency is what's getting this conversation being muddied. Like there is a stable coin, and like we said before, are you going to take the Fed out of their job? First of all, they're a private company; they're not the government. We have to make that clear.
right.
And so this is not the government; this is the Fed, but they still have to print the money because the stablecoins are backed 1 to 1. Now, is there a way that there's synthetic value that's going to be allowed to be backing these dollars? For example, paintings or any kind of asset that is kind of like more obscure, arbitrary. Is it treasury notes or from the United States or other countries that can back these U.S. dollars 1 to 1? Those are things that we could have questions about. But as of right now, it's U.S. dollars or like kind um, assets, treasury notes, and so on and so forth that back these stable coins. So it is 1 to 1 for the US dollar. The money is still getting printed from the Fed,
Yeah.
right? Um, but some of these are the laws that we should be talking about. Then you know what? We can talk about the ethics or the efficacy of like this $10,000 limit or whatever, flagging the Fed or
Right.
the federal government about this, which I think is complete BS. It's my money. Don't flag it. If I'm taking out my money on my bank, you know how much I have. It's absolutely
Yeah.
stupid. Um, but but we there are different buckets of what we're talking about here, and we just have to make sure that that is absolutely clear.
And to me, it seems like going back to the social media stuff that was going on specifically during Trump's first term and sort of into Biden's a little bit with on at Congress. Anytime we saw Mark Zuckerberg or someone go up there, the inability for Congress to understand how Facebook works doesn't give me a lot of hope that they're going to nail this on crypto stuff, right? I mean, what do you think what do you think will really happen? Because I just don't think that they have any comprehension of any of it. I mean, most of them at least, to where, and they're not really doing much of. I mean, it doesn't seem that Congress wants to do much of anything right now. And obviously, we'll get to the Trump stuff in a second. It seems like that's purposeful, probably right now. I'm sure Trump doesn't want Congress stepping in and trying to regulate this at all right now. But I mean, do you think there's any? Do you think this turns into the industry figures it out before government can figure out how to regulate it? Or do you think it's kind of the Wild West until government figures out how to regulate it?
Well, you know what? I think that when we start regulating before actually implementation is actually a more dangerous than waiting to regulate.
I
And
think so
so,
too.
and so I think when you have these different companies and these industries start to emerge, you have to see how they're going to be used. And whatever. It's like you didn't make a stoplight before you had a car.
Right.
We had to,
And
we had
because
to
there's there's an argument right now of even what do we call them? Are they securities? Are they
right.
currencies? Right. Like we can't even figure out the definition of these things legally. Right.
I think that the executive order, the executive order actually clarified that, and there has been bills to clarify that more that came through Congress in the past year or so. Um, but there is still questions about like the definition of state securities or commodities.
And they
But
kind of
with
change because like a meme coin seems like it is more of a, as you mentioned, it's a little more gambly. It's a little more pop culture. It's more like a trading card, right? I mean, I know
exactly
that's a silly analogy, but it really is kind of the value is purely social in the sense that if more people want it and it's more rare, it costs more money. If less people want it or it becomes less rare, which is like why Donald Trump kind of, I guess some people were upset about him that he did those like trading card, the digital trading card, kind of, he literally called them that, and then did another round of those. And some of the first investors were like, well, you're kind of diluting the pool by releasing more of these, right? Which dilutes
right.
the investment overall. So, I mean, that seems like I think that's pretty easy to understand on that stuff. But obviously, that's a small, I mean, how much is meme coins? Are they even, how big of a part of the market are they?
So they're billions of dollars.
They are.
So I mean, the individuals can get wrecked with it, but I mean, they're not going to look. I think another thing that everybody has to understand, and in this industry is growing, but this is still like a
Yeah.
small business. This is
One
this is
percent
like
of people, yeah, in the U.S. have.
it's not even about the percentage of people; it's the percentage of capital.
Yeah.
Like when the housing market collapsed, we're talking about multi trillions of dollars of real estate, just real estate.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is only $2 trillion. If that collapsed, which is global, it's not just focused
Right.
in the United States. If that collapsed, we would have a lot of unhappy people that lost a lot of wealth, but it wouldn't be a blip on the global economy.
Yeah, it wouldn't wreck. It wouldn't. We wouldn't have a recession because of it. We wouldn't. Yeah, it would be nothing.
You would have people pissed off. You would have all kinds of stuff. There'd be lawsuits to galore, but nothing would change in the world. So we have to understand like the literal size of these markets, right?
Yeah.
But you said something about like the regulation. I just want to go back to that. Is that just to my last example, we didn't make a stoplight before we had cars. It just
Right.
that does not that's not how it works. I I am very skeptical that the Congress just doesn't know how to act and doesn't know how to think for the most part. Um, and I also am very worried about the partisan politics that this becomes a divisive issue. It's more of a political issue than actual what is the best for the nation, the economy, and this industry. And
Yeah.
you see people like Senator Warren as taking this up as her issue, and driving this forward with some, things that she's saying absolutely correct when it comes to, we can get into the Trump thing, Trump's,
Yeah.
dealings with his companies and corruption and people getting wrecked because they're in this digital casino that they don't know anything about. This does
Yeah.
happen, um, but at the same time almost willfully being ignorant to any other aspect of it because she has a democratic bone to pick with this, and now this is going to be the Democrat stance against crypto. I
Right.
mean, we can go back to Katie Hobbs that just passed a bill in Arizona last week where she did not want the legislature putting, hold on one second,
Yeah.
that she vetoed a couple bills of like the legislature putting money into Bitcoin holdings, other Bitcoin bills that were going through Arizona, but she did keep the one that says, hey, if we confiscate your Bitcoin, we're going to hold it and we can use it for profit. So there's that one. So we can
Right.
have, we can take your Bitcoin and hold it and we have a profit, but we can't buy it. We can't use it. We can't do this. We can't do that. We're not going to pay your taxes with Bitcoin. We don't like this because I'm a Democratic governor, but I will keep it for your money. So it's like this whole like political thing that has emerged. So,
Which is
um,
also what happened with Trump, right? Too, because Trump wanted to do a cryptocurrency reserve, which was totally based on cryptocurrency that we had confiscated via federal prosecutions, right? It was, and so we basically have this pile, and he was wanting to say, no, I mean, I don't believe in making it any sort of reserve in the United States is insane to me when we're running up $2 trillion deficits every year on the budget. There is no extra money that you can put in savings, but that's sort of a separate thing. But similarly, the federal government has a bunch of these cryptocurrencies that they have confiscated. It's not that they invested in them, but they do want to try to make them do something, right?
the federal government does have about 200,000 Bitcoin sitting around. So that's
Which
not
is worth a
nothing.
lot, right? Yeah.
It's not nothing. We just
Yeah.
take $105,000 today times $200,000. That's quite a
Yeah.
bit. But it just shows you how inept I think the government is. And I think Senator Lummis has a very good point about this. Their gold reserves are still cost on their book cost, book value is still priced, I think, in 1973 prices. It's like $47 per ounce of Bitcoin, not the $3,000 it is today. And so Cynthia Lummis is just like, guys, why don't we take I don't even know how many umpteen thousands of tons of gold that we have in our custody, but can we price it appropriately and use that to either A, pay back debt, A, balance the budget, and B, maybe we can buy Bitcoin and other assets with it. And so it's not like we're going to raise taxes or use tax money to do this. Her idea
Already
is just
there.
saying like we have this gold. Gold is a thing that we have as a hedge as a country. Maybe we should
Yeah.
do these other things. And I think another thing that people really don't take it is like, oh, the Bitcoin reserve, that's stupid. Well, we have an oil reserve, we have a natural gas reserve, we have wheat and corn, we have gold, we have all kinds of different reserves for a rainy day and the weathering of different types or trends within the economy. And so why don't we just add a little bit of this? And so I don't think it's that absurd. And I think honestly that the government should be more bullish on making reserves of all kinds of things, computer chips,
Yeah.
GPUs, or anything
Yeah.
else in the future that we should
Totally
have.
agree. Stockpiles. The difference, though, is that everything is money when it breaks down to it, as far as whether it's Bitcoin or gold or dollars or whatever. It's all money. And we don't currently, like, the difference is, like, with an oil reserve, you take the money you pump out, you take the oil you pump out of the ground and you save a percentage of it and put it in reserves. Same thing with all these other kind of reserves that we have. And those make sense to me, especially after COVID. It's obvious that we need to have PPE reserves. We need to have lots of reserves for things that we would need in an emergency
Agreed.
situation. And we were not prepared for that pandemic. But the difference here is with money, we don't have extra money at the end of the year. We're spending $2 trillion more every year than we take in taxes. And so to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the government to be like setting up a slush fund of any kind without, first getting that budget balance. Like, because most of the people that have
Well,
these kind of wealth funds are like Middle Eastern countries that have a ton of like oil money coming in. And so they need to put it somewhere, because otherwise it's like you need to invest it properly, or else it's just cash, and that's not good. No one
well,
wants.
I would agree with you if we're talking about U.S. taxpayer money to buy Bitcoin, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about revaluating the gold reserves and maybe
Yeah.
buying some. Or remember, just like oil is mined, Bitcoin is also mined. So you don't have to spend money. You just have to get in the game.
Yeah. And those are good points. And I just think that the problem, I would say, is like, we got to pay down that debt first before we start talking
100
about, and
100%.
and I would even potentially, I think that's a good, I've not done the math on how much gold we have, but it's not a bad idea to talk about. Although, like I said, none of that matters until we get budgets in place. Okay, so let's talk about Trump's entering into the cryptocurrency stuff, because I think it's totally fair to say that Trump and Biden were both very anti-crypto, right? Until Trump wasn't. Both, I mean, Biden's SEC essentially and Justice Department was going about it by basically prosecuting instead of regulating. It seems like that was kind of their method. Instead of getting stuff through Congress or even regulating cryptocurrency in other ways, they were basically just going after bad actors that were doing. They charged people with things like money laundering, and some of these players are now working with Trump and stuff. So that seemed to be the Biden administration's thing. Trump's administration, did he do much in his first term about cryptocurrency? Was there anything other than just the bluster of him talking about how it's untrustworthy and it's used for criminal activity? But there was no actual activity that I
I,
really knew of.
I'm pretty sure that his SEC. Well, let me go back to Biden really quick. Even though I was against everything the Biden administration, mostly everything the Biden administration was doing when it comes to the crypto industry, their philosophy wasn't just prosecute bad actors. Their philosophy was, let's make regulation by legal precedent. So so instead of trying to get a big bill of clarity through Congress, they said, well, that's not going to happen. Let me do these different things so precedent is set, so we understand how to operate via precedent. I thought it was a horrible idea, but that's how they're doing it. Um, During the Trump administration, I'm pretty sure the Trump SEC was the first to file the Ripple lawsuit of are they selling unregistered securities, which actually
Right.
started that whole conversation of what is a security, what is a commodity, and what does it look like. And now Ripple is getting to the tail end of all of this, going like, we feel we're getting a little more understanding of what's going on. So Trump wasn't a passive, and the Trump administration and his people weren't as passive as everybody says they were, even though they weren't as, I guess, bold as the Biden SEC.
Yeah, it certainly didn't make as many headlines. I'm sure they did some stuff, but it wasn't like hitting my radar, which is, I pay pretty close attention to a lot of what goes on in politics. So I heard a lot more under Biden's administration than it seemed like I did under Trump's first administration. But obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of these people got into the campaign financing kind of game and realized that that's where they could influence this. And really, cryptocurrency is just one of many technologies that realized, this is my summary of what it seems like they were saying. The Biden administration Democrats are not for us, and therefore we need to get someone else in there. And it seems like this is the case with the sort of tech bro crew in Silicon Valley. It seems like we heard about this with AI specifically. We heard several people mentioning that they did not like Biden's plans for AI. And so a lot of these kind of tech bros and cryptocurrencies and a lot of these things backed Donald Trump in the 2024 election. I assume that helps change his mind a little bit, because all of a sudden you're getting lots of money from these industries that I'm sure Donald Trump did not have a great understanding of cryptocurrencies when he was saying a lot of the stuff he said, and whether it be true or not. I'm sure that the things, again, when you're dealing with something that people can purchase things with, yes, of course there's going to be criminal activity when it comes to some sort of thing that's anonymous, but that doesn't mean it's entirely that. There's obviously situations where there are people in countries whose currencies are not as stable as the US dollar that have used it for a more stable investment. And, Bitcoin seems unstable to us because we're Americans who have the dollar that's been the reserve currency for forever, or our entire lives for sure. But if you're in Venezuela or a more dictatorial sort of place, like you may want to have some of this stuff that's more stable. It's also it lets you get around things like government censorship and the things that are worse in other countries. So I think we often look at things through an American lens and forget that this is a worldwide thing that is. So there's good, there's bad, just like any kind of technology, right? So Trump comes around on it, but and not just comes around on it, but starts World Liberty Financial, releases, like I said, several of these sort of digital trading card things, does a meme coin 2 days before the inauguration. And now the big hullabaloo is there was a New York Times article a couple weeks ago, or last week, I think, about sort of trying to connect all these dots of World Liberty Financial, which is the new company that his sons run. And the claim, of course, is that Trump is not in control of any of this stuff. But it's pretty obvious to me, just from reading the details, that the specific thing is they want to release this Trump coin, and the contest that they set out was the top, I think it was 220 people get to come to a dinner at Mar-a-Lago. The top 25 investors in the Trump coin get to do a VIP part and then go do a tour of the White House. Potentially that part's maybe not going to happen because they're trying to separate the personal versus the presidential stuff. So I guess first question, what do you think about all this, and how above board or not above board do you think it is?
Um, this might be an unpopular opinion, but uh, I like the transparency. It's obvious,
Yeah.
right? You know what's not obvious, and this needs reform all across the board. We're talking about campaign finance, who's doing what. When Joe Biden's, and I hate to when it's like, oh, well, Trump, well, look what Biden did, but I'm not
No, no,
saying that.
no.
What
But
I'm
I think
saying
it's.
is,
I think I'm going to bring it up in a second too. So
when Joe
maybe
Biden's
first.
son selling paintings, for millions of dollars, I think that's
Right.
like something that's like what's going on there for access, obviously, to Biden.
Right.
When Representative what was it Elon Omar, she
Uh-huh.
hires her then boyfriend to be her consultant, pays him a lot of money as the
Right.
consultant, then ends up marrying the guy and
Yep.
using that money being moved around from here and there.
The
When
Trump trial in Georgia had the same problem. The
the
prosecutor hired her boyfriend, and
exact
yeah,
it happens so often. I think that this is probably one of the most common relationships is like I have a spouse or a boyfriend, they set up a consulting company and all my money gets funneled to them.
yeah,
There's many times where you're selling either merch as a campaign or whatever, or creative ways to get people to donate. Trump trading cards, I don't think are more any different, but they're just now cryptocurrency, so people are scared of it. Um, there's many people who have, like, for example, who is it? I think is it Besson or Lutnick? I can't remember. I think it's Lutnick actually, who was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, and Cantor Fitzgerald has a huge stake in Bitcoin and the I think it's a Bitcoin yield product. So they
I'm pretty
want
sure that's Lutnick. Yeah,
and so they want Bitcoin to be able to have Bitcoin custodial products that are now be able to generate yield. So we give you your Bitcoin and we get a yield from that. That they're trying to make that more of like a federally regulated and like federal thing, so they can do it. And he's in the administration. So look, there's a lot of shady business in every aspect of government, from local to up there. And I don't think that this is any different, besides that we are one is Trump and we're focusing on it a little bit more than we would any other ones. I mean, let's talk about the Supreme Court taking trips paid for by people who have court cases in front of the
yeah,
Supreme Court. Like, this
yeah,
is nothing new, guys. And so either A, we're going to get serious about um, money and politics and some unsavory connections that these elected officials and government officials and regulators and legislators are having, and we're going to get serious about that, or we're not. And I'm not going to jump on the anti-Trump, train and just say, "Oh, Trump's corrupt," blah blah blah. Let's look at how corrupt he is. He's trying to be a king. Bullshit. Without actually talking about the system that is enabling it for
yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
So, like, nip it in the bud or shut the hell up.
Yeah, I think there's two things though that I would push back on that a little bit. Is that a I think you're right about the Trump trading cards that happened when he wasn't the president. I think it's no different than selling a T-shirt. Honestly, it's the same as the sneakers and the guitars and all the other things that Trump is selling to his fans. Essentially, I don't really think there's a huge difference, other than
Sure.
yes, there's that potential for it to people to lose money on it, and you're not
I
going to
mean,
lose money on this.
AOC sold her "Eat the Rich" shirt after she wore that dress to
Yeah.
the Met Gala.
Yep. Yeah. So some of these things are things that have happened in politics forever. The difference now is that as the president and as the head of the executive branch and the guy that can regulate or deregulate stuff as far as being in charge of the agencies that would be regulating this, there's a difference there. And then the other difference is that it opens up the corruption to everyone in the world, which is a little different. And I do think I don't love bribes, period, but I certainly have a higher skepticism of foreign bribes than I do of domestic ones. You're right. Money is moving all over the place. This is construction contracts. This is all sorts of things. This is unfortunately a part of politics, less in America than it is in, say, Russia, for example. But there's money's always changing hands. You're right. Everyone goes to Congress. They're millionaires, even though they get paid $140,000 salaries. They're millionaires by a few years into being in it. You're right. It's a problem across the board.
173,000, sir.
Oh, it's 173 now. They've gotten a pay
It's
increase.
all.
Well, good for
Yeah,
them.
no, it's always has been for the past, I
Oh, it
think,
has been.
15 years or
Well,
something.
that's how little I've paid attention to congressional salaries then. So yeah, but I mean, so still, not enough money to have two houses and then be making millions of dollars in the next few years. And so you're right, it is a problem. I just think that one thing that concerns me here is the the Trump coin stuff and making it specifically a contest to like explicitly meet with the president. You're right. I don't see the difference between what Hunter Biden was doing, except that this is now the president doing it. I
Look,
believe Joe Biden was happy that his family was being able to be taken care of financially with the view that he was getting access. I don't even really care if anything happened or not. And there's no evidence thus far that Joe Biden specifically profited from it. So to me, it's like we were Republicans specifically. So I'm going to talk about my side was all over the Hunter Biden stuff, right? And it was corruption, and we all called it corruption. And I just don't understand if that is corruption, him selling paintings, even though he's not a painter, for millions of dollars to have access to the president. I don't understand why this wouldn't also be when you're right. It's transparent. I just don't think that necessarily makes it okay if like foreign people are
well,
getting
here's the
president.
thing. I think that everybody's. This is. Let me make a statement really quick because I know I'm being very nonchalant about this whole conversation. All of
Go for
this
it.
is corruption. The stock act and shit like that doesn't work for Congress. None of this is complete corruption, right?
Yeah,
And all of it is just shady businesses all the time. But this is a litmus test for the American people. You're finally understanding how the sausage is made. Don't tell me that this isn't happening all the time. We have Bob Mendez with these foreign governments giving him gold bars and putting him in his
literally
house,
gold bars.
and so this, and then for example, he's only one of 100 people in the Senate, and yet nobody knew about it. Nobody said anything about it. This is literally how this happens. And so the American people are over here going like, and honestly, only one side is actually going like, hey, this is kind of messed up. The other side is like ignoring it until it's their people. And this is the litmus test because it is so transparent of like, hey, this is how this happens, and has been happening.
Yeah.
So we have insider stock trading, and so again, we're talking about these companies with the Trump organization, whatever. But I just brought up Cantor Fitzgerald with the CEO, Howard Lutnick in the cabinet. We're talking about everybody who is, in Congress that is front running these trades and these regulations. We're talking about Bob Mendez and people like him with gold bars with from foreign governments. We're talking about, and then the thing is, and here's the thing about the American people is, um, they don't have the money to get into that room, and they never had the money to get into that room. And now
Right.
it's
Yeah.
transparent that you say, hey, if you get more of these Trump coins, you can get into that room. But before, it was just the donors anyway that was getting into that room. And the fact is, you didn't know about it
Right.
is because you didn't have the money to get in that damn room. And so now that everything is
Yeah.
transparent, everybody's up in arms going like, I can't believe it. Well, either you're going to tackle corruption and influence in politics, or you're not. And I'm not going to sit here and like, nitpick about Trump's thing or World Financial or all these other things. And I don't think anybody else should because it isn't solving the problem. And the problem is transparent right there. And Trump is showing you what the problem is. And if the American people can't get their head out of their ass to figure out that we have to solve that problem, not just Trump's problem, then the American people are lost.
Do you think there is a solution to that problem? I mean, like, do you think there's any way to stop that kind of corruption? I mean, some of it seems obvious. The Bob Menendez thing is so comically,
It's
you know,
comical. It's
yeah,
literally a cartoon representation of corruption.
yeah. It's like turkey's giving him gold bars that he's like lining his suit pockets with.
It's ridiculous.
Which I think is also hilarious, as if when the FBI comes in and picks up a suit and it weighs, significantly more than a suit should, they're not going to start checking the pockets for these gold bars. I mean, it literally is comical. I mean, it's like
And
his
and,
wife
and
was getting a new Mercedes. I mean, it's
and
hilarious.
nobody, and apparently nobody in the Senate knew about it.
Yeah,
Apparently, even the person that is like, even Cory Booker, who is the literal senator next to him from the
yeah,
same state.
yeah.
It's just absurd.
Yeah,
It's
and that's
absurd.
the other thing is because I mean, someone wrote, oh gosh, I forgot his name, wrote a book about it last year that I've yet to read, but I need to. Just talking about basically going over all this stuff is how everyone comes to Congress. This is how they get rich, and like that is part of the deal, which is I think why they don't care to legislate anymore. Why would they? If they get in there and they keep getting reelected, they keep making more money. And so you're right. I mean, we got to tackle this. I do think the stock thing would be number one, although I think it's going to be tricky because I do think that there would be a potential problem with First Amendment rights of, you don't get to strip away a congressperson's First Amendment rights, which I do think this would fall under, or at least it's some sort of constitutional right that they can do what they want with their money. And I think it would be hard to stop the stock trading thing. Although I think it needs to happen because this is even happening in this cryptocurrencies sort of world too, as far as it looks like there were buys with people that knew what was going on with the Trump coin before it, for example, it happened before he announced the sort of dinner thing that was obviously going to bump up some of the purchase in that, but there were some people that were trading on that earlier. So it's obvious that like insider trading is happening all the time inside of administrations and inside of Congress. It seems hard to stop legislatively, but I mean, do you have any ideas of how you fix the corruption? Because you're right, this does seem like it's just across the board. It's just that Trump is
So
much more out there.
it's funny that we're talking about First Amendment rights for our elected officials and what they can do with their money. But for some reason, we just had this conversation about Pete Rose not going into the Hall of Fame, and now he's like, and everybody's up in arms because Pete Rose, who bet on something with his own money in one institution, was not allowed to do that because it was a organization. Again, maybe I go back to the stablecoin conversation. A private organization that
Right.
terms and services in his contract that said you cannot gamble as an MLB employee
Right.
if you're playing the game or managing the game, and then you're banned from the Hall of Fame because of that. And people are like, he should never go in there because he disrespected the game. But for some reason, we're giving all of these people who are supposed to be controlling and legislating and regulating the United States way of life
Yeah.
this freedom of saying, no, just gamble away. Who cares? Just bet on stocks and make the regulations and whatever. But it's the freedom of speech rights that we're. So it's like, what are we doing here? We have more control over who works for the MLB than we do who's making laws for the United States government.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Like, we just got to be serious here. So it's like, what can we do? I don't know. Like what can we do? Why don't we just be serious?
I mean,
Just be a serious people.
ideally it would be that we don't reelect people that clearly are gaming the system, but we're not interested in that unless that person's in the opposite party. And that to me is sort of the thing is like I said, what is the difference between Hunter Biden's paintings and the Trump coin? I don't think there really is a difference, except that instead of it being the president's son, I mean, even though it is the president's sons that are running this company, Donald Trump is making money off every transaction of that coin. Because that's the other thing about it. It doesn't really completely matter if that coin completely craters. They're making money on every single transaction. So they will make money no matter what. I mean,
Right.
on the thing. And so to me, that's the tricky part is because people seem to be much more up in arms last week about the potential plane gift from Qatar because I think it was simpler to understand. It was like country in the Middle East that supports terrorism and, harbored the 9/11 terrorists and Hamas and stuff. And then they give Donald Trump a plane and he, like people can see that transaction really
Right.
plainly in front of them because it's literally as big as a 747. And I think things just get more convoluted when you get into stocks, when you get into insider trading, when you get into cryptocurrencies. And I think most Americans either A, tune out because they don't understand it, or B, because now Republicans, it's their guy on their side doing it. That seems to be the main excuse. It's like, well, he's doing it out in the open and so therefore it's not corruption. I don't necessarily buy that it's not corrupting, because I think
It
that
is. It 100%. It 100% is. Look,
yeah,
I worked in hospitality for 20 years, right? And one thing that we always had in our executive meetings was we knew how much theft was going on, how much on the table dealings was going on, and we had an allowance. We didn't want it to happen, but we knew it was happening. So
yeah,
I don't want to be naive and think that we can stop all the corruption, all that, and all that. How we stop? No. And there's going to be insider stuff, and there's going to be all kinds of stuff. And even if we told people to divest, or if we told them to hold their assets until they're out of Congress, they'll be stacking, they'll be setting up things for when they are out, or if they're family members or friends, or they'll find ways. There's loopholes. But one thing we didn't do is sit there and be complacent. We knew that the person was robbing us blind
yeah,
at the bar, but we had one. We knew that we wanted to only keep it at 2.5% of theft. That was our thing. If we saw that started to go up, we started to keep trying to
yeah,
keep it in the 1 to 2%.
yeah,
And we didn't, and then we started just setting people up and firing them. So
yeah.
like, but there is this balance. But what I see right now is that the balance is out of whack of allowing these egregious things to happen, and us just like turning a blind eye. I mean, I just was talking the other day, and I heard wasn't they made was it Jimmy Carter divest from his peanut farm or something?
Yeah, I mean, he did voluntarily, right? Yeah, he sold his peanut farm, I think.
And so, and then that's something to applaud. But
I agree.
we are not that America anymore.
No,
And so, what does America want to be? And that's why I say this is a litmus test for America and Americans.
yeah, I agree. I mean, because I think the difference is when you talk about that service industry and having that shrink number of which every retail operation has this, every company has some sort of like shrink goal where there goes on like we want it less than this percentage, and we know some of that's going to happen, but we're going to stop it at a certain level. The difference is we are those people, like the American voters are the people that have to make that decision of when that grift goes too far, and we don't seem to care to police it on our side. The Bob
Yep.
Menendez stuff is a great example of the only reason the Democrats really came out against him at this second. By the way, he got charged in 2015 and got off in 2015, and then happens again in the 2020s. And the only reason the Democrats, in my opinion, got behind that prosecution and trying to expel him from the Senate is because they like it was coming up too close on an election campaign that they thought they'd potentially lose a seat in the Senate. And so all of a sudden it becomes like, well, it's worth throwing this guy under the bus if it's going to keep our Senate seat, and that's really, it boils down to that. And that's really the same thing that happens on the Republican side. It was the same thing with George, what's his name in New York? George Santos, similar situation there. It's like they knew this was going to be bad overall. So they went all in on, okay, let's get rid of him. Matt Gaetz, similar situation. It's like there are certain times where the behavior gets too bad, or it's going to, reflect badly on them, or it's going to hurt their seats. And then they do something. But really, it doesn't seem like anyone's asking. I don't see a lot of Democrats harping on Nancy Pelosi's trades. I don't see a lot of Republicans saying anything's wrong with this Donald Trump stuff. But both sides are happy to police the other side when they're going to vote against that person anyway. So until you're willing to vote against someone that is your representative for doing something you think is morally shady, even if it's not illegal, because again, some of this stuff is not illegal. There's nothing illegal about what Trump is doing. I mean, to just be completely clear, I've not seen any evidence that any of this stuff that he's doing is not legal, right? I mean, is there anything that you have seen that is not so far? Not
Um,
anything. I mean, specifically with like releasing a coin and World Liberty Financial and taking money.
Look,
It's
I don't,
unconstitutional, but
yeah, I'm not a lawyer.
yeah,
So, and again, Trump is a brand and a name. He just shares that name, and his kids run the company. So we understand the connection there, but
yeah,
and honestly, that's a whole thing, to a slippery slope thing. I mean, not even a slippery slope. That's just a conversation about, just because you are successful, does that mean that you don't have a company anymore because you become an elected official,
right.
or the brand has to be dissolved, or it's like, these are important conversations. So legal or illegal, does it look like it is, like I said, some greasy palm, backdoor BS?
Yeah.
Happily, it's out in the open that we can see it. But I think that we have to really have a conversation as Americans.
Yeah, and to me, it's like when I say it's not illegal, something can be unconstitutional and not illegal. I know that sounds weird because I think a lot of the stuff that goes on in the Constitution, the check for it is the other branches of government. It's not the legal system, and so it's yeah. If it says that the government can't accept foreign bribes, essentially of any kind, foreign money of any kind, Congress is the one that has to enforce that. And it's very obvious that Republicans in Congress are not going to enforce that against the
Right.
Republican president. So that's why I mean it's not illegal. It's like not something the Justice Department could go after really anyone for doing, but certainly not the president of the United States because he's in charge of the Justice Department. So
Right.
it
Right.
seems it's obviously complicated. There's a lot of wheels moving here, but
And
um,
last, but last thing, I mean, one thing I do want to say, and I want to state that I think that we get really too much in the now and in the hype. Like this is none of this stuff is unheard of or new. This isn't novel. This all of this stuff has been happening in history the whole time for the United States history. Corruption, gifting. I mean, what is it, Lincoln? Gifts. I think it was it Lincoln with the elephant tusk from
I don't
Thailand?
I don't know
The
about
king.
that.
I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Lincoln with the King of Siam. They're like, hey, here's a great elephant tusk, and Congress was like, nah. But he also accepted. Was it who was the person that accepted the Statue of Liberty? Was it also Lincoln?
No, that was after Lincoln because it was a gift after the Emancipation Proclamation. So
It's still
Lincoln would have already been
it was
dead.
a
So it's probably
gift.
his vice president. Yeah, yeah, it was a gift. Yeah,
All right. So anyway, long story short is like all these different things have happened. We have had technology roll out. So AI, cryptocurrency. These are no different conversations than the horse and buggy to car, or
right, yeah,
or plane travel, or people's jobs when it comes to the backhoe or whatever the hell. So like I think we just have to, one main focus is to find some kind of moral clarity of what the American people in America wants to be going forward, and honestly just have those hard conversations about like what the regulation we want to look like, and how does that fit into what America should be, and how does that fit into the Constitution. And I think that we're going to be okay because none of this is really, honestly, in my opinion, super, devastating. This is all like just traditional
right.
conversations of how to legislate within a country, especially one that's has a GDP of $30 trillion.
Yeah, every single the entire cryptocurrency, everything could go away, like we said, and it would not cause an economic collapse of anything. It wouldn't cause recession. Yeah, my main problem is just if people are giving Trump money, and then what kind of influence does that give on Trump to potentially change those things when we have this sort of this new thing where we just think the president's king and can everything's executive orders.
I mean,
That's exactly what.
let's talk about corruption. Let's talk about this money issue. Let's talk
Yeah.
about lobbyists. Every person in Congress has their favorite lobbyists that they're pushing their thing. If it's the
Oh, for
banking,
sure.
if it's what pick your niche here, pick your lobby and your pack
Yeah.
here that's going to push your congressman to vote the way that they wanted to because of winning or losing their next election. Like so, it's all there.
Right. But the difference is that lobbyists used to have to get a majority of Congress to be able to pass a bill to get a regulation that helped them. And now they just need the ear of one guy. And that's where I think there's a little bit of a difference. I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other. It's just that things can happen quicker if you
Sure.
can get Donald Trump's attention than if you got to get 200 something people in the House, and you got to get 60 people in the Senate. And so it's a lot more effort, and I'm generally the guy that like wants things to go slow. Like I think that the reason we set up the Constitution the way we did is so that there would be consensus and there would be compromise and things would move slowly, especially through Congress and the Senate. I think that's a feature, not a bug. And
Right.
I worry that the
Well,
influence of the money on Trump make a rash decision that is worse than not doing anything.
well, look, again, I don't think that's a even though we can, the words might be spelled different, they still have the same meaning. Um, Outside influence is taking money to influence American policy
Yeah.
and politicians. That's the same thing, even though they're from different branches. And even though I do agree with you that Trump could make a rash decision, the checks and balances from the legal from the judiciary and the Congress is what slows things down, and that's what we're seeing. That's in front of the Supreme Court actually had their hearings last week, there are arguments about just that,
Yeah.
about can federal judges from lower courts stop executive orders.
Yeah.
And so we're going to
Makes
find
them.
out really soon. I mean, and that is a check and balances that slows things down. So again, I'm not too worried about all of this if people are paying attention, and the branches of government and our officials and our government workers actually do their damn jobs, which that's I'm more skeptical about.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. Okay, Matt, tell us how people could find you, where they should check you out.
You can email me at Matt at where do I want to write to? Well, we'll say Matthew at DiemerForCongress.com. That's Diemer for Congress, FOR Congress.com. Send me an email there. We do a show called dailycryptonews.net. It's called Daily Crypto News, but you can find it at dailycryptonews.net. Sign up for the newsletter there, and then you can find everything else that we do.
Yeah, pay attention to Daily Crypto News for he will keep you more informed than I will on how cryptocurrency stuff works because he's better at it than I am. So pay attention to the experts. Matt, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you hanging out.
Absolutely. I'm going to eat this peach yogurt now.
Absolutely. Enjoy it.
Thank you, sir.
My thanks again to Matt for joining me. Matt and I used to spar he was the Democrat, I was the Republican on a weekly show on Fridays. And so it was good to talk to him again. And I enjoy talking to Matt. I was actually a little surprised that he was more like, hey, this kind of corruption's everywhere. I personally still want to call it out. I think it's an important thing to do, and I think that we should want to eliminate it everywhere. I think it's fair for him to point out that this is not just a Donald Trump political corruption problem. This is happening throughout Congress and politics, and it should be something that concerns us. So check out Matt at Daily Crypto News, the podcast, or at dailycryptonews.net. One thing you do before you leave, if you can help me out, is you can rate this podcast wherever you listen to it. That helps me out a ton, and you can share it with someone if you want to do two things for me. That's it for me. I will catch you next time.